and this is my super handsome boyfriend, Ben. And the thing about Ben is that he has one characteristic that is very prominent to him as a person, and that is he really loves magic. Like, there is normal amounts of loving magic, and then there's Ben. And that's great. Love it. Absolutely love it. But the thing is, I am not at that level, which means that he'll often be trying to talk to me about these kinds of things, and it just goes over my head. So Ben thought it would be a really awesome idea for us to record our journey of him attempting to get me at his level, of me like learning how magic works on like a competitive level, trying out new deck strategies and all that jazz. So here we are, Flourishing Fox, because Ben loves foxes, and we're going to be getting better together. So to start us off, Ben had me write a list of questions, just like my overall questions from kind of being on the outside circle of the competitive magic world and just the things that I don't understand. And we thought that for our very first episode, we would have Ben answer those questions for me. So, first question. Who names the decks? And like, the reason I'm asking that is because you'll be telling me, you'll be like, oh, this is a Bant deck thing, or this is like Risen Reef nonsense.
Right, yeah.
Like, who decides what those names are?
So there's a pretty standard naming convention most of the time, which is your color combination and then your type of deck. So Bant is the 3 color combination of green, white, and blue. So whenever you say Bant, you just know what colors the decks are, and then if it's a Bant control deck, you know it's a green, white, blue deck whose game plan is controlling the game and winning in the late game. Or sometimes it'll be like there's a Bant Ephemerate deck. Ephemerate is a magic card.
It's the flicker.
Yeah, it flickers. So then you would know it's a green, white, blue deck who is centered around the card Ephemerate. So it's going to be flickering things and having a bunch of enter the battlefield triggers. So there's the standard naming convention, but you also have like weird names too sometimes. Whenever you go to a tournament, you register your deck list to make sure that it's legal for the tournament. And when you register your deck list for the tournament, you have to write a name down for the deck. And so sometimes people get funny with it. There's a deck in Modern right now called Oops All Spells, because it doesn't have any lands in it, so it's all spells, there's no lands, and it just wins on like turn 2 or 3 typically.
Are you able to pull off a deck that isn't like the entire point is I have lands so that I can
like do
buy
things? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Oops All Spells, it's like, oops, they forgot their lands. 'Cause isn't that a cereal, Oops All Berries or something? Yeah. Captain Crunch? Yeah, it's a pun on Captain Crunch. Yes. And so then the next category of deck would be the ones that are named after their specific combo pieces. So there's like Splinter Twin decks, but not anymore. Kiki Chord, it's named after a creature called Kiki Jiki, and Chord of Calling, so it's just 2 colors. You don't have to specify the color combo because the only thing that matters is the combo pieces. So you don't need to say it's like Naya Kiki Chord. You wouldn't say that. You just call it Kiki Chord. And then the last ones are like the ones that are just named seemingly randomly. Tron is the main one for me. It's named after the Tron lands. I think it's because it's like Voltron. When they come together, they're better. It's the 3 lands that when you have all...
Like that?
Yeah.
Just do it with me. No. Ready? I didn't think you did it.
We're cutting that.
No, we're not.
When they all, so they're called the Tron lands because they come together, they're better. If you have all 3 of them on the battlefield at the same time, they make 7 mana instead of 3 mana, so they're called Tron lands. So decks that run the Tron lands called Tron. It's pretty straightforward. So I guess to answer your question, it just kind of depends on if it's a person registering a deck for a tournament, they decide to name it something wacky, or if it's following a more traditional naming convention of like color and then play style, or color and then important card type. So once you figure out the different color combinations, it's pretty easy to know what the deck does when you see the name.
You have different decks that are going into tournaments and being played. And I know oftentimes you've talked about how like 70% of the metagame is this particular deck. Like when Oko was a thing, everybody was playing Oko, and they were all playing like the same deck name. If two people are going into a tournament and they are playing the same deck name, does that mean that those decks are identical? Like, is every single card in that deck the same thing? Or as long as you have the major pieces for the win combo, you can kind of change it up how you see fit?
Kind of the latter. So there's things called flex slots. So you've got your main core of your deck. That is what the deck is named after. We're going to use Grixis Death Shadow. Grixis is blue, black, red. It's color combination. Death Shadow is a card. So you know when you're playing Grixis Death Shadow, you're playing a blue, black, red deck that is centered around the card Death Shadow. Death Shadow decks want their life totals to be lower because as your life total lowers, Death Shadow's power toughness gets bigger. So there's like a core of like Death Shadows and cards that lose you life to like draw cards, and that sort of shell that's like the core of the deck that's really only like maybe 20 or 25 cards, and then you've still got like 10 flex slots left over to kind of tune to what you expect to be playing against, what your anticipated metagame is going to be, or if you've got like a spicy brew that you want to like throw in there and do your own unique twist on things.
So like if you know you're going up against a deck where you need a lot of removal, then you could throw in some like extra removal cards in there. Okay.
So when you see, like if you're in an online tournament and you see that your opponent's on Grixis Death Shadow, or you're playing against them and you get to know the decks and you see the lands that they're playing so you know what they're on, you can generally guess with, I would say, like 80% accuracy what the cards you're going to be seeing are, but there might be like a few 1 or 2 loves that are just unique to that person's build.
Oh, cool. Fair enough. Next question. Next song. So how do you tell what is a good deck versus what is like a competitive deck? Because I remember like some of the decks that either I've built or you've built for me with like just your extra cards lying around. You're like, oh, this is a good deck. But then sometimes you'll build a deck and you're like, oh, this is my competitive deck. This is what I'm going to use in tournaments when the world isn't currently having a plague. So how do you go? So how, like, what is the difference between like, oh, this is a fun deck that I can play with my friends in kitchen table versus like, oh, this is the deck that wins the tournaments?
That's a good question. I would say there's 2 key things that it boils down to. First is your intent when you build the deck.
To kill everyone.
Yes.
To be the lone
Number
survivor.
1, kill them all. Last man standing. And then the second thing is your budget constraint. So unfortunately, Magic is a little bit pay to win.
Really?
Yeah. It's an expensive hobby. So the more expensive a card is, you can generally assume the better it is, and casual kitchen table style decks are generally okay with taking a power level hit in favor of budget if like there is a strictly better option but it costs $50 a card, or there's a version of the card that costs 1 or 2 more mana or is a little bit less efficient but it's like 15 cents. Like obviously you're going to play the 15-cent version. But when you go to a tournament and you play in the mirror match against the guy playing the same thing you're trying to do, but he doesn't have a budget constraint, he's going to beat you every single time because he's going to have better mana than you are, because lands are expensive. That's a budget constraint, is how good your mana is. Or he's able to play more efficient win conditions, because Jace the Mind Sculptor is a better win condition than 4 mana Guilds of Ravnica Jace, which is not good. Things you don't know
Jace
yet.
always wins.
Jace will win. Jace will win the game, hopefully. If he can't,
then you suck.
I wasn't going to say that, but maybe that too. So it's a mix of budget and intent. So I could take all of the tuned, meta, expensive, competitive cards that I own and put them together into a deck to play at kitchen table, and it would still be like a Mimi kitchen table for fun deck because I'm not trying to win. A good example is the Siege Rhinos list. I play 36 Rhinos. If you all, I'll put a link in the description to a really old video.
Now we're official YouTubers.
Yeah.
Put some links.
Put some links in the description from Saffron Olive's old 36 Rhinos list that I play a version of that on the kitchen table, and it plays some good competitive level cards, but the intention is for a multiplayer format, and it's not trying to win, it's just trying to play as many copies of Siege Rhino as it can.
So Siege Rhino is for like, just playing with
here to
some
have
friends.
fun.
Just trying to play 36 Siege Rhinos.
How many
with
Siege
me.
Rhinos does it take? That's the question.
At least 36.
At least, exactly. So even though that deck has a good mana base in it and it has efficient, good removal spells in it, the plan isn't efficient. Playing copies and clones of Siege Rhino is not a good way to win a game of competitive Magic.
We'll see about that.
I'll show you how that is.
I will
prove
become
to
the
you.
best on Siege Rhinos and nothing else.
So if I just took that deck into a competitive league on MTGO, it would just do really badly because the plan is not good, even though the budget is there. So it's just a mix of what your intent is and how big your budget is.
I know that decks, new cards are released like every 3 months, new cycles. And then there's going to be new mechanics that are introduced during that time. There's going to be a different theme to what you're supposed to be doing. Like, are you hitting with big boys? Do you have artifacts? Different themes to the cards. So how long can you play a single competitive deck for? Like, can you take a good modern competitive deck and play it for 2 years straight? Because I feel as if every time I've heard you talking about the competitive meta game, it seems as if there's always a different deck that is kind of leading the pack, and is the turnover that fast?
So that's an interesting question. So recently the turnover has been increased because Wizards of the Coast has been pushing power level on the new cards that they print out. So previously, back when I started in 2013, you would get a new set would come out and you would have maybe one card that is good enough for Modern or Legacy in it. Obviously the standard metagame rotates with each new set that comes out because it's only standard is the most recent 2 years worth of cards, and it rotates every fall essentially. So when a new set comes out, the percentage of cards is so much smaller, it's more likely to have playable things in it. It just shifts the metagame much faster. So if we're looking back at the older formats like Pioneer and Modern and Legacy.
And what are those formats, Ben?
So Pioneer is 2013 and on. Modern is 8th edition, which is 2003 and on. And then Legacy is every card that's ever been printed in Magic, which is 1993 and on. So with the bigger card pools, it is less likely that a new set prints a card that is strong enough for them previously. However, in the last year and a half or 2 years or so, they've really been pushing the power level of cards that comes out. And so the metagame in the older formats has been, I would use the word warped. I would say it's been warped by the new cards that come out, and they've been banning stuff pretty frequently in the older formats now too. So the old answer to your question is that you can buy a deck in Modern and play it until it gets banned, which is a while, generally. A couple years. But these days, it just kind of depends. And they're printing cards directly into Modern, which is a thing that they didn't used to do. So it used to be you'd have your standard sets that come out, and so they're in Standard, and then they are also legal in Modern. but Modern Horizons is a new set they did last year, 2 years ago, where it just skipped Standard entirely and put it directly into Modern, so the cards that they were allowed to print is a lot stronger because they don't want to mess up Standard with strong cards. And that just completely demolished the format, in my personal opinion, and made everything horrible. So with them doing things like that now, I don't want to say that you can buy into a deck in Modern and then expect it to be good for forever, because they could just print something in the next set that completely invalidates your strategy. But I would say that once you buy into the staples, like your fetch lands and shock lands and Snapcaster Mages and removal and whatever the staples of your format are, once you buy into those, the majority of the price for a competitive list is in the mana base. So if you have...
Wait, really? Like,
I would say 80% of the
money
cost.
that you are dropping is going to be in creating...
the mana base. 100%. Yeah, I would say 80% of the cost of the deck is in the mana base.
Oh, that doesn't make any sense at all, but I'm excited to learn more.
I will be sure to teach you more about that. Yeah, so once you invest in the mana base and you have 4 of every shock and 4 of every fetch, then whenever you want to build a new deck, it's really not that expensive. So like a Modern deck costs like $800, right? But if you have your shocks and fetches, building a new Modern deck's like $75 to $150. So it's really just getting invested in the staples, and then it doesn't matter.
So much like a good wardrobe, you have to have your white t-shirts, you have to have a couple of pairs of jeans, maybe like a good sweater or two, and then you can like throw in your weird things like a red jumpsuit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. You've got to have your white t-shirts and your like jeans, exactly, and your blazer. You need a navy blazer.
Always. I have
and unfortunately those are expensive. Exactly.
We just bought him a new navy blazer.
Yeah, so you have any other questions?
So I think that's all that I have.
Cool.
How are you going to be teaching me? What do we have in store for everybody who's watching right now?
So up next is I'm going to do a metagame analysis with Hannah on
What is
Modern.
a metagame?
We're going to look at all of the currently viable competitive decks in Modern.
Okay.
And so you were asking about what all the deck names are and what the cards do. So we're just going to go over that. We're going to look at every single competitive list in Modern. We're going to look at like the top 10. Call it the top 10. And I'll explain to you what the game plan is, what the main cards in the deck are, and what their matchups look like against the other top 10 decks. And then, once we do that, I'm going to let you pick whichever one of those top 10 that you like, and I'm going to teach you how to play it. And we're going to go and do an MTGO League online with you playing and me coaching, and we'll see how that goes.
Terribly.
Oh, it's going to go great. It's going to be wonderful. We're so excited. That's all I've got for you. So.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all that I have in terms of questions. If you guys have any other questions that you would like the all-knowing Benjamin to ask for you, or to answer for you, please leave us a comment. Other than that, generic YouTube, like and subscribe.
Smash that like button. Smash it. Cool.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.